My mouth is jaw dropping when I see the response after October 7th. I can see this happening in Europe because when we did our film out there, we already witnessed the decaying attitude among people about the Jews and their pro Islam views. I remember when we were out there filming, our film crew would talk amongst ourselves and say, thank God we live in the United States because this could never happen there. It's barely a decade later, and almost everything we thought could never come to the United States is here now. It's absolutely here now.
Over the past decade, America has changed dramatically. Anti-Semitism is exploding. Trust in institutions is collapsing. Conservatives are deeply divided, and many Jews in places like New York are beginning to ask questions they never imagined asking before. My guest today says none of this happened overnight. Martin Mawyer is the founder of Christian Action Network and has spent decades warning about ideological extremism, cultural decline, and America's growing loss of moral confidence. Martin, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thanks, Daniel, for having me on.
Do you think America understands how serious this moment actually is?
Yeah, so the idea of does America understand? That's always a perplexing question for me because parts of me says, how can they not? But the other part tells me in reality, no, America does not understand. And the reason why is people have real lives out there and they're going to work and they're with their children and they're busy doing other things. And the last thing they really want to confront every day in their life is the dangers that is present on their streets and in their communities. So there's a willingness to kind of disregard it and move on. But that doesn't mean the danger isn't real. And the danger is very real. And what we do at Christian Action Network is try to break through all of that noise and try to reach into the homes and to the ears of Americans to shine light on things that they have to know or should know. Because on the other flip side, Daniel, the Islamic community isn't out there playing games or going to, the pool every day and watching television every day. They're out there strategizing, and they have some very powerful leaders who not only help them strategize, but dictate to them what that strategy is. These are people that will actually sit through classes and learn how to conquer America. And what do we have on our end? We have churches who rarely ever talk about how do we save America? How do we save this country? How do we keep our Judeo-Christian identity in this nation? We gloss over it and we talk about other things, feel-good things in churches. That's not what the other side is doing. They're out there plotting, they're preparing, and they're doing a very good job at making a market impact in this country as we know it.
10 years ago, this conversation would have sounded unimaginable to most Americans. What exactly changed culturally and politically to bring us to this moment?
Well, a lot of things, the number one thing that I see is we've allowed so much immigration, both legal and illegal, into this country of a religion that has no intent at all of trying to assimilate with American values. As a matter of fact, they want to do the complete opposite. They want to coalesce around their own communities, shut themselves off from the regular American values and communities that surround them. And then they want to figure out ways to impose their religion on the other people. So they want us to assimilate with them rather than the other way around. And it comes in so many different ways that they approach this battle. A lot of it is through, well, let's get into the education system. Let's get to the kids and schools. Another way is, well, let's threaten them with violence if they do not want to agree with our way of life. There's so many intimidation factors. Let's make sure that the people who live in the community, our Muslim community, are kept inside and not outside. Let's control their lives. Let's put them through the schools and what we want them to hear. Let's never teach them about Islamic values. One of the things that I think is most interesting, especially regarding the controversy of Sharia courts in some of these communities, is people don't truly understand how these courts operate. So what we hear, and if you listen to the Democrats, is that, well, these communities have their own Sharia courts, but they're voluntary. people go into these courts saying, I'm willing to submit to whatever the judge says is under the Islamic law. And they tell us that, but that's not what really happens in these communities. You have women and you have children there who are bound by Islamic law to have to agree with these Sharia courts. And they put pressure on them. When we did our film in Europe, and it's called Europe's Last Stand, I hope people get a chance to see it and order from us. And we're going to be showing it down in Palm Beach later this November. When we went in there and we investigated the Sharia courts and talked to some of the Muslims that are out there, it was imperative for us to understand that men and women in those communities are bound by these courts, not through a legal reason, but through community reasons. They can't leave these communities. They have nowhere to go. These immigrants coming from other countries can't actually go back home and say, I disagree with this Sharia ruling. I'm going to leave England and go back to Africa. No, they're stuck in those communities with those people who who are their family members, and they are kicked out of their family, and they possibly face other forms of family violence if they don't agree with these three accords, especially the women and the children. So it's not really a voluntary system as they would hope we would try to understand. It's not like that at all. And that concerns me greatly because it's really hard, as you can tell with me trying to explain it to you, how difficult it is to explain it to the average American. Because what do they know about these courts? They know what they see on NCIS, right? They know what they see on TV of how a court operates. They've never actually been in court themselves, so they are TV fed with information about how courts operate, and they think that's how these courts operate, and it's not. And a TV show like NCIS or whatever, you have a court reporter, you have a prosecutor, you have a defender, you have a judge, you have a jury. That's how we are bred to think about how a Sharia court might look, but they do not look like that. They don't have stenographers inside of these Sharia courts. They have no record written down as to what these rulings were, what the punishments were. It's all kept internal. You never can go back in later. State authorities can't go back in later and look at the proceedings of that court. So it's all done in secret. And this is very frustrating. A number of years ago, we did a documentary on organization called the Muslims of America. And we exposed nearly 12 dozen Islamic training grounds, guerrilla training grounds, according to them, that were scattered around the United States. And the people who lived in these communities never really saw the outside of these communities. They don't know what their constitutional rights are. They've never even seen an NCIS show. They don't have TV. So all they know about America is what their leaders are telling them. So in the case of Muslims of America, someone punished in a Sharia court there could become confined into a 20-foot hole where they are stuck with a lid put over it with just some food and water to live. They could be in that hole for some 30 days or more. Others are taken out to posts and they are whipped on those posts. But they don't know that they don't have to do this. They don't know what their rights are in America. They only know what the rights are that are being told to them by their Muslim Islamic leaders there. So America needs to not approach this with American eyes. They need to approach it with what the Islamic eyes look like inside of these communities.
Now, figures like Zohran Mamdani are becoming increasingly influential among younger progressives. What does that tell you about where American culture and politics are headed? Do you see more figures like Zohran Mamdani being elected in different cities across America?
Well, certainly in cities, yeah, because the whole message there is we're going to give you free stuff if you vote for us. And we're going to take from the horrible billionaires to make that money available to you and those services available to you and all these other benefits available to you that are free. What they don't really realize and quite understand at the middle class and lower class level on the economic structure is that once the billionaires leave, and those programs are in place and they can't get the money from the billionaires anymore, they're coming for you to get that money. So you are going to be paying for it. It's not going to be free for you forever. It's only free for you for now while they can rip the money off of the billionaires and provide it. But they're headed out. they're vacating. I like how Governor DeSantis said in Florida that Mamdani has become the greatest real estate agent for the entire state down there because he's bringing so many people into Florida. People are fleeing not only to Florida, but most people don't understand the state that is leading, that has the most migration coming to it, is South Carolina. It's not Florida. It's not Texas. It's not what we think it is. It's South Carolina. So why South Carolina is conservative? It's family oriented. It's away from the politics of the liberal left wing of these big cities. So people are fleeing there, and that's going to leave you with a bunch of people in New York City who are going to now be burdened with those costs, or the city's going to go bankrupt. Who knows which will come first? I can take my guess, and I think any logical person looking at the numbers would say, well, the city's going to pretty much go bankrupt under the policies of Adani.
Now, you appeared with Tucker Carlson back in 2017 on his show. And honestly, watching those clips today feels like a completely different conservative movement, feels like a different person, Tucker, nowadays. What changed inside the American right, and why are they becoming more and more open to Islam, Sharia law, and things like that?
You know, it's difficult to really walk into the minds of other people. I am astounded by some of the things that I see Tucker Carlson saying and others that you wouldn't think would be preaching the things that they are saying. The only thing I can guess is that money drives a lot of people and it changes their views. And connections and affiliations drive a lot of people. You know, it's probably classically known by now that when Elon Musk first came to the United States, he was deemed as a liberal. He was a left winger. But he later said, well, I was that because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to fit into the California culture, into the Silicon Valley culture. And so I sounded liberal. What's going on in the minds of these people, what secret agendas they have, is probably not something that you and I can look at and define. And what they tell us probably isn't believable. I'm astounded, but I'm thinking it has more than anything. Maybe Tucker was slighted by Donald Trump. Maybe Tucker wants to position himself with other movements in this country. I don't know. To me, it looks like suicide myself. And I wish I could explain it, but I cannot. I can't imagine myself being in that position because, as you said, I was on Tucker Carlson. I said things. I can't imagine that now I would be contradicting all those things I said back then. It wouldn't feel honest. I, and I can't imagine anything that would make me want to do that. There's not enough money in the world to take away what I believe are the truths of God in my heart and say, well, I'm going to switch it for some other political or economic means.
Now, in your opinion, did October 7th expose something much deeper inside the West, not just about Israel, but about America, universities, media, Western civilization itself?
Well, you know, I'm always, my mouth is jaw dropping when I see the response after October 7th, right? I mean, I can see this happening in Europe because when we did our film out there, we already witnessed the decaying attitude among people about the Jews and their pro-Islam views, and I could see it out there. And I remember when we were out there filming, our film crew would talk amongst ourselves and say, thank God we live in the United States because this could never happen there. And we finished that film in 2014, and it took us several years and many trips to Europe to do. But it astounds me that that was 2014. It's barely a decade later, and almost everything we thought could never come to the United States, be imported from Europe into the United States, is here now. It's absolutely here now. And the people we interviewed who were trying to defend the European culture and the Christian culture out there were saying they envied the United States because of the rights that we have here and the freedoms that we have here. And they wish they were living in the United States and not under this, what they viewed as dictatorship of their ability to speak freely about Islam and other things. And we agreed with them. But now I'm not so sure if I went there again, they would say, oh, I wish I was in the United States, because they would tell us, well, and they did warn us. They said, look, unless this word gets out, and this is why we did the film, you guys are going to look the same way as we are. So we did a film called Europe's Last Stand, America's Final Warning. And we thought it could have an impact that, maybe people will wake up and say, we don't want to be like Europe. But that's not what happened. We produced the film, we released the film. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to be showing it again this November down in Palm Beach. But, you know, as we started the program, a lot of people want to watch their TVs, play their games, and go to the family pool and not pay attention to what's really going on in America. And there are people in charge who do want to make changes. Another point I just want to make is that when we were there, we knew who Antifa was. We had never even heard of Antifa ever until we got there. And Antifa was everywhere. It was in Denmark. They were in France. They were in England. They were just about every country you went to. There were Antifa members that were opposing anybody that opposed radical Islam. And when we got back to the United States for the next several years, Antifa was just a European thing. But look what's here now, Antifa. Antifa's everywhere. And some of the things that you're talking about at the universities are Antifa led driven. It is here in the United States, and people need to wake up. I hope they actually watch our film, because if you ignore it, this is what we're going to look like. And I just can't imagine what it must be like to be a Jew at this moment. Eventually it's going to come to Christians. I think it's not going to stop at Jews. It's going to come to Christians. But right now, I wrote an article before Mamdani got elected that I don't know how, if you're Jewish, you could actually stay in that city because of what is going to be coming after you. But nevertheless, there's still not a big Jewish migration out of the city. And I've tried to ask some people, why is that? And the explanation I am constantly given is that the younger Jewish people just don't believe it's going to happen. That they don't believe that this Islamic narrative is going to impact their life. And now I look at it, you can look at the streets, you read the newspapers, you see what's on TV. It is happening, and nevertheless, they're still not leaving. I don't understand it myself. And they have a history, right, the Jewish people, of being persecuted more than any other religion or group of people ever in the entire world, in the history of the world. They should see these signs and know that we can't go through this one more time. Once is enough. But nevertheless, I don't see a lot of response.
Yeah. Apparently, there was a protest last night outside of Mamdani's home for these reasons. I think they're trying to see if they can make some changes with protests, but doesn't seem likely. I wanted to ask you, why does it seem like anti-Israel protests, they often become anti-American, anti-Western protests? You don't see people carrying American flags. People are covering their faces, kind of like the Black Lives Matter protests we saw with the Antifa, like you mentioned, whereas pro-Israel protests are civilized. People are carrying American flags, other flags. Why do you think these anti-Israel protests are like this? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts very clear on this. The one thing the Islamic community knows, and it is very effective at, and it is true, violence speaks louder than words. And they know that. And according to their religion, it's allowed. It's cherished. It's preached that it's okay to do. So they don't have the guilt that you and I or Christians would have in committing violent acts to make social change. So they know violence, and people are scared of them. They're going to change. And I think that drives it more than anything else. They just don't want to become a victim. I, I was talking to my staff yesterday. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with Islam, but slightly makes my point, though. Was I think a man in California had some Trump signs out on his fence, and some guy came by and beat him to a pulp. I mean, just beat him to a pulp, and sent him to the hospital. And yesterday he died. And I'm thinking, who kills people over a sign on a fence? Well, if you live in that community and you know that someone now may come out and kill you for that sign, are you going to be putting up signs in that community anymore? So violence has its way of being very effective. Islam understands that. And I think the nation of Israel understands it as well. But they're willing to, as a nation, to put violence back on the people that are placing violence on themselves. But in America, I don't think we quite understand that as a collective society yet.
How do you explain this red-green alliance, the alliance between Islam and the far left, the liberals? It would seem that on paper, they don't really agree on much. Like you have the Gays for Gaza. If they went to Gaza, they wouldn't be alive for a long time. How do you explain it? And why do we see the Democrats, kind of the left, are becoming increasingly open to defending Islam? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the one thing we have to understand about Islamists is that they're not ignorant brutes. They just are not. They're very cunning. They're very smart. They're very strategic. They know exactly what they're doing. And they understand that the liberal left has a mentality and a belief that they are to be accepting of all people, and especially people who are minorities. They view members of the Islamic community as minorities. So the Islamists look at them and go, they're going to open their arms to us. They're going to welcome us into their fold. So let's go out and make an alliance with them because we don't have to preach and convince them to be on our side. They're going to open up their arms and say, we are with you. And the fact that they can look at other countries and say, well, yeah, you are throwing gays off the top of roofs and you're doing these horrible things to women and if they violate the hijab rules. But that's not us in America. No, that's them over there. So you can trust us. We're different. But meanwhile, they know they're not different. But nevertheless, they're easy people to be able to bring on your team and coalesce with and convince them that somehow we are all working together. So I think the ignorance is not necessarily on the Islamists. They're very smart. The ignorance is on the liberal left who don't understand that they are nothing but being tools for the goal of Sharia law in the United States.
And we know that much of these issues are caused by the Muslim Brotherhood, but the Muslim Brotherhood is banned in a lot of Arab countries. But in America and in the West, they are flourishing because they kind of take advantage of our democracies for their own agenda. What can be done about the Muslim Brotherhood? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Congress, I, I think on May 13th, I'm looking at my notes here, they held a hearing on Sharia law in the United States. And the Muslim Brotherhood came up in those hearings. And in particular, the Holy Land Foundation trial in 1991 came up, where documents were released about how the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood is to conquer the United States from within. And they see that and they know how to do that, but we don't understand it and people don't see it. And therefore, all they have to do is put out lies and say, no, we are with you. We want to assimilate. We want to be American. We love this country. We love the values here. But beneath it, they start to infiltrate the schools, the universities, the businesses that are out there, and slowly work their Sharia compliant mentality into those systems. And again, as we mentioned earlier, Americans are pretty ignorant about this strategy, and it's very difficult and a big challenge to try to wake them up and to educate them. I mean, after all, how many people want to go through the Holy Land Foundation trial of 1991, right? Something more than almost 25 years ago, and possibly understand what that trial revealed about the goals of the Muslim Brotherhood and its operations inside the United States.
Do you believe that America is facing a spiritual crisis more than a political one? It seems that less and less people are identifying with religion, with spirituality, with God. Do you believe that if people were more spiritual, we would have less issues? What are your thoughts on that?
Now, I think it's interesting because in Islam, they don't make a distinction between the spiritual and the political. It's all wrapped up into one. As a matter of fact, a lot of the critics of Islam say the Quran is basically a political book. It's not a religious book. It's not about worshiping. It's about how to run a country, how to control your family, how to punish people, and rituals that you have to go through. It's less about spirituality and more about politics. On the flip side, in Christianity, the emphasis is more about spirituality and less about governance. There are certain things in the Bible, the Old and New Testament, about running countries and governance, but that's not the main emphasis of the Bible as opposed to the Islamic Quran is. So I think when we look at it, spirituality, increasing the spirituality of America is not going to win this battle. You have to be able to figure out how do Christians look at the Bible and come up with how the government should be governed. And that's what we need to do. And a lot of people say, well, that's a separation of church and state issue, right? They say, well, you can't do that. nevertheless, when they look at these Islamic communities, Sharia courts, they never breathe the word of separation of church and state there. So they're very selective in how they want to use that term. But look, God is about governing. I mean, that's what he does. He has a system of governance because it's a law of nature, and he wants us to follow the laws of nature. So thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not, go down the list. Those are governing principles, and Christians aren't so much into that now, but eventually they're going to have to wake up to it, Daniel, and understand that if you want to survive, you're going to have some governing going on with your spiritual beliefs as well.
I want to ask you one final question. If you could force Americans to understand one thing right now before it's too late, what would that be?
Wow, the one thing, huh? That's we're working on so many things here, and
It
and
could
the
be more
one
than one.
thing always wants to change every day in my mind. You know, we've been focusing heavily on artificial intelligence lately, and the Pope recently came out with this encyclical about the dangers of artificial intelligence, and he made so many very, very good points about where that industry is headed and the danger it does present to society. But look, I think the one thing that I would like to see changed in America is that churches stop with the feel good sermons and get their church communities to become active in the communities that they live in. They don't have to be active in national issues, but you have churches just about on every street corner in the United States. And if those churches would engage their parishioners into defending what is God's principles in those communities, that would spread out. It doesn't have to spread from DC down to the communities. It really needs to spread the opposite way. It needs to spread from communities all the way up to DC. And that's how you're going to affect real change in this country.
Beautiful. Martin Mawyer, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I truly appreciate it. How can people learn more about you, read what you've written, and follow your projects and your organization?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So go to our website. That's christianaction.org. That's going to be the easiest way. But what I really encourage when you get to that site is at the very top, we have a newsletter called the Patriot Majority Report. It's free to subscribe to. And we release all kinds of information. We release our films, our podcasts, our articles, and many other little treats into that newsletter. It's hosted on Substack if people don't know what Substack is, but it's a forum for groups like us and individuals to get our message out without a lot of tech censorship, as we all know we suffer under. So go there, subscribe to our newsletter, and we just released an article, as I mentioned earlier, about the Sharia congressional hearings that took place last week. We're going to be talking about congressional hearings that are coming up on care and many other issues out there. So we have a plethora of topics, and we try to keep everybody, you know, we're going to give them the information that I'm not going to get from the daily newspaper or here on their network TV show.
Amazing. Thank you again. Wishing you all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on.
Pleasure. If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.